Hello and welcome to the Addicts podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today's episode 117, and we're interviewing Tricia P. How are you this morning, Tricia?
I am spectacular. It's a beautiful Tuesday.
Yes, and I should say also good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I said good morning.
Well, it's morning for me.
Oh, this is true. So it's always morning somewhere, like they say.
Right.
All right, let's dive in and get started here. Tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. Okay, so here we go. I have two sides to my childhood. I have the side that looked really awesome. Born into a family with three siblings, mom and dad. And I don't know, by the time I was 4, I was, reading, writing, doing arithmetic, playing chess. At 5, I was playing classical piano. At 6, I was already a competitive swimmer and just well on my way to, thoroughly enjoying life. And of course, I wanted to be hot on the heels of my siblings who were considerably older than I was. So I was, I think, in a hurry to grow up. And, as it, generally speaking, I had good social circles and a lot of great things happening in my life. But in that, I also already had this weird sense inside of me that told me I needed to be, super independent, like needed to handle everything on my own. And so at 4, when I experienced my first sexual assault, I already, even though the house was filled with the grownups and this person was, an adolescent, a family member of some of my parents' friends, and they were all there, I still already felt like I shouldn't say anything. And so I never did.
Do you know why you felt that way?
As I go back to some of that modeling that I grew up with, it was very much, old school. I'm in my 50s, so very old school, 70s mentality. Leadership by especially the moms was, we keep our ugly at home, quiet, swept under the rug, whatever, and we always just put on our good face, and put on a good front. And so that's really the thing that I can tie it to the most. But I also, heard a lot from, say, my siblings, and even relatives. I would hear, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And I think a lot of that, again, being kind of, well, let's just put it, accelerated in my intellect at a young age. It was hard, I think, for the adults to realize that I could carry on in a conversation, an adult conversation, and understand and articulate and things like that. So I was told a lot, like, nobody wants to hear what you have to say, go play like a child, go over there. So
How did that make you feel?
well, very, very invisible. I felt very dismissed a large part of my life. And there was, definitely periods where I was being loud and I was definitely like pushing to be heard and seen, because I didn't feel that. In fact, my dreams from as long as I can remember, probably 4 or 5 years old, all the way until I met my spouse at 26, my dreams were filled with being standing in the middle of my driveway, my childhood driveway, screaming for help and with everybody around, but nobody could hear me and nobody could see me. So I felt very invisible, very dismissed, very unvalued, and never really felt validated in my beingness.
That must have been really hard.
It was. So I gravitated to a lot of attention that was maybe unfavorable.
What do you mean by that? Give us an example.
I sought acceptance from older boys, right? Because
Yeah.
I was an athlete, but also I think I felt safer, even though I had already been violated. I think I felt safer having them be friends. Like I felt like I needed that protection. And they weren't as mean, right? They weren't as mean to me. They were nicer. Um, but also because, the next sexual assault, which was technically, or not technically, it was an actual rape when I was 12, they stalked me for a year after. And so in that stalking, it was, I just want you to be my girlfriend. And so that message for a young child was, okay, so this is what, this is what is expected is, if you do this, then you have a relationship. And so I was really confused because I didn't want to be sexually active. And so it was just like a really confusing time for me.
Who was the person that assaulted you? How did you know them?
They were my one of my best friend's boyfriend's friends. So it was an inner circle situation. So that was really difficult time. And about the same time, my dad that raised me was killed in an automobile accident, a motorcycle accident. And so in there, I noticed that all of the adults, I was like, how is everybody coping? How is everybody smiling? Because I just wanted to be numb. And this happened a year after my parents just got back together after a separation because of his chemical addiction. But what I witnessed all of the people doing was, the adults doing was drinking. Everybody had like a beer in their hand and a cigarette in their hand. So at 12, I was like, I'm going to try that. And guess what? It worked. And so alcohol became a coping mechanism for me at 12. And at first, primarily in traumatic or emotionally difficult spaces, because it allowed me to escape. And smoking allowed me to kind of get that, little euphoric buzz, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there was a lot of different things, but all the while I was still managing to maintain my momentum in school, and my momentum with my sports and, other things. And so, but just because I was hiding the trauma and putting on that good face.
Yeah.
And then I ended up with multiple groups of friends. These are the friends that I drink and party with. These are the friends that, I bring home to mom and dad. These are the friends that, people can know. And these are the friends that people can't know. And then there were, my more just, sports, type people. So it was just, had very, very distinct places, and I would go where emotionally I was going to get what I needed in that time.
So how was high school stuff? Did you graduate? You did all that fun stuff?
I finished high school, yes. I finished high school in adult school. I also.
Why was that?
Well, so it's kind of twofold. I became a mother at a very young age, but I did so intentionally. I have a really good ability of connecting with the physical body, and I knew that it was the time. And I can say that with all validity, it was the time, because my son was the only child I was able to actually carry and carry to term. And so I had my son 2 months after I turned 17. So while I was pregnant and after I had him, I completed an adult school. because back in those days, you got kicked out of school if you got pregnant.
Really?
Yes. So in the third quarter of my junior year, I was asked to leave school before I was even showing because I confided in my coach. And so I had to start my junior year all over, which was quite annoying. Actually, must have been the tail end of the second quarter because they didn't let me do final midterms, and I had to start the whole thing over in adult school. Yeah, that was the times back then, right? So I did finish in adult school independently and doing independent studies, which for me was actually quite wonderful because by the time I was in sixth grade, I had already completed 10th grade work. So when I got to high school, I was redoing things that I had already done because I wanted to go to regular high school. I didn't want to skip grades and I didn't want to, I wanted to be normal. And so I stayed the regular path. I went to, junior high and high school regular. So it was just, by the time I got there, I was like, I already did this. But after I had my son, I actually lost two and had a lot of struggles with my physical body. I have a lot of autoimmune issues, and one of them causes my body to attack itself, like if it's a foreign something that it needs to get rid of.
What is that?
And so I'm A negative, Rh negative, and then I've actually had multiple autoimmune disorders that keep kind of shape shifting and being different things. So my body will attack my own joints, my own, organs and the way that they function, things like that. So my body actually attacked two other children that I got pregnant with and just basically aborted them on its own. It said, no, thank you. We don't want this. And so, I had to deal with those kinds of losses also. And so again, always coping with alcohol. It was just my way of doing things.
How did you get the alcohol and cigarettes being so young? I know you said it was around 12 was the first time you did it.
Again, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and looking mature for my age. If you got dressed right, you could walk in and pretty much do what you wanted. I also had a lot of older friends. So when I was 12, 13, most of my friends were juniors and seniors in high school. It was a lot easier for them. So it was never a problem. But there were also a lot of places that, again, if I was dressed, I could just walk in. I had no trouble hanging out in there were some very, fun beach local bars that I could go into, with no problem on the, on weekends and just hang out because I loved music. I loved to dance. So I always just kind of had like that older crowd of friends. And again, it was just a totally different time. It wasn't so hard for us.
Yeah. No, I know. I grew up in the 90s, and even then you can go get cigarettes and stuff. And like you said, if you look the right, I remember I had friends where if they had more facial hair and stuff like that, they were able to pull it off.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I was just always really good at, I could put on makeup, I could put on high heels and a dress and just kind of pull it off.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How was it during school and getting high? Were you getting high during the day and drinking during the day? Or how is it? What was your use like during that time?
Sometimes in high school, we'd cut class. I started working around 14. I had a job, and so a lot of times I would just not feel like going to school, and I'd go. It was just a small sandwich shop, and the owners like to go surfing. So like I'd go in and I'd say, here, go surfing, I'll take over. And then I would just drink beer while I was there. Because they serve beer at the sandwich shop. And so I would do that a lot. Not every day, but a lot. And it just kind of depended on, didn't have the best high school experience. And
What happened? Was it the pregnancy that got you, or what? Was there
oh
other
no,
stuff
that happened. I mean, by the time that happened, I was ready to leave anyway. Then I left school and it wasn't an issue. And my friends were my friends, but most of my friends, again, when I was a freshman, were seniors, so they graduated. So by the time I was a sophomore, like, my friends were already gone, so I would want to be doing what they were doing, and so it was difficult to feel like I wanted to stay at school because I really didn't have a lot of friends that were in my age group.
Yeah, that must have been hard.
My social circle went to a different high school than I did, so I was kind of separated from them after junior high, and then we didn't have any of the same social circles. So yeah. So I mean, all in all, it wasn't necessarily a bad experience. It just wasn't the greatest experience. My son's father was, again, one of the older, right? So he had already left school. He already had, his full-time job and everything. And so I spent a lot of time, just hanging out with him, and we just kind of started our life at 17, and oh gosh, he was 20 by then, 19 going on 20. And we just kind of started our life until it didn't go well. And we didn't end up making it, but we stayed really good friends for a long time, until he passed away, actually. And we raised, we did a pretty good job when things weren't bad, sharing responsibility with, for our son. He did his best to do every other weekend. And,
I was about to ask you what happened after high school. So you pretty much, like you said, started the adult life, so to speak.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And what was your youth
I had a
like?
full career, but before I was 19, or by the time I was 19.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what was your use like? I mean, at what point did you say that you might have an issue to yourself?
There were several times. I had a 30-year relationship with alcohol, and before it disappeared from my life, and my recovery journey is a big, long 25+ year journey, because not everything in my life was ready to recover all at the same time. So in all of these things that I'm sharing with you, I developed other situations, right? I had eating disorders. I was anorexic. I had body dysmorphia. And so, I had to heal from that, had to be first and foremost. After I had my son, I really jumped into that anorexic space, pretty heavily. So I had to get re-healthy. And I think a lot of it was because I went from, a 95-pound athlete to somebody who I gained 75 pounds with my son. It was pretty devastating at 16, 17 years old to gain that much weight. And so, after I kind of just, it was really important to me to try to, get back to that. And body image was an issue. But, I think I, had some very significant bouts of sobriety. So I drank regularly. I wouldn't say daily. I drank regularly from 12 to 16. Then I took a break from 16 to 19. And then when I was 19, I allowed alcohol back into my life. And there was a period of time where there was some amphetamine use. Again, it was very helpful for the anorexia. And that was pretty short-lived. It didn't work out real well for me. I didn't like being paranoid. It didn't serve me. But alcohol generally speaking did, but it always grew to higher levels. And so usually you know, I would have these cycles of, you know, like I can handle one, I can do, you know, and it would start out slowly, but it would always end up with daily drinking, in excess of a 6-pack a day. If, you know, again, in excess, because if I started you know, if I went out, you know, like my mom would have my baby, or, you know, we would just be having some time out. You know, I would drink hard alcohol, and that, you know, just trash me. And then I would end up, you know, having the drama that came with it. And then, you know, the hangovers, and then hair of the dog always worked for me, right? Like I hated hangovers. So just get up and, you know, drink the next day. And then you know, I did that from like about 19 to 21, DUI for my 21st birthday.
It's quite a present.
And yeah, great gift. And then, you know, I, you know, had a bout of sobriety, and then got another DUI about 3 years later. It was actually a day after the probation lifted from that one. So I was always able to maintain. I was always a very good, solid, strong mother. I was always, you know, I was a single mom, right? So I was a breadwinner, had a career, I had a job, and I always would, you know, care for him and all of that. But in the evening after he would go to bed, you know, I always would, I'd have, you know, I'd have a bottle of wine, I'd have a couple cocktails, go to sleep, wake up, do the same thing the next day. And then there would be those weekends out, you know, where it would, you know, escalate, or I would take trips, you know, without him, because I was young. I was, you know, 19 to 23, you know, and my friends were in college. And I was, you know, full-time parent, and, you know, so there was, you know, there was some push pull. Didn't really get accepted. I felt again like dismissed and
By who?
devalued
Your friends?
by other parents at my son's schools, by teachers, etc. Because I'd be walking in again, 19, 20, 21 years old, and they're all in their 30s and 40s. And, you know, it was just very dismissive. And so that was, you know, that was a hard space for me as well, not really having a place where you fit. But I'd say mostly, you know, my drinking would escalate around domestic violence. I had relationships that were significantly surrounded by domestic violence, emotional abuse, and I also endured 3 other rapes in that time period. That, you know, really just kind of left me in this like needing to be numb space. Then sobriety, and when I met my spouse, who is now still my spouse, we have 5 children between the two of us. But, you know, my relationship with alcohol was very low level, still diagnosable alcoholic, of course, you know, 3 beers a day, something like that. But again, never, you know, never really harming my duties as a parent, and a wife and a caretaker. But then, you know, fast forward to, you know, 29, I had a few really near-death experiences. Again, my physical body was attacking itself. And I ended up actually having a full hysterectomy at 29, and changed me hormonally. So hormonally now I was, you know, kind of out of whack, unbalanced, and kind of had to, you know, learn how to, you know, move into that space. And we had some really traumatic scares with some of our kids, you know, primarily our oldest daughter had came down with AML leukemia her freshman year of high school. And so that was, you know, a tough time. So having to be on all the time, you know, took away from my drinking time, but also in the down times, you know, when somebody else was helping out, I would definitely lean into, you know, escaping through alcohol. And it just really got difficult. And I developed generalized anxiety disorder. And here we get to what ultimately took me out, right? What ultimately took me out was this generalized anxiety disorder and a general practitioner who really didn't understand the ramifications of prescribing benzodiazepines to a daily drinker. And so, you know, again, I was never really into controlled substances. You know, opiates never did anything for me. They were terrible for my eating disorder and body dysmorphia, because all opiates ever did was give me a headache and constipate me. So they were of no use to me. But the benzos, you know, they worked. Now, I still only used it as prescribed, but I was still a day drinker. And so it quietly and gradually over time became, you know, synergistic. My tolerance to alcohol increased, my anxiety increased, therefore the need for my low dose Xanax persisted to be, you know, from just in the morning to 3 times a day. And it just grew until I said, can't do this, right? It got to the point where when I would wake up in the morning, I was having physiological withdrawals. I had developed a physiological addiction that I didn't understand, because I had always been able to, you know, drink for 3 years and stop for 3 years, or, you know, whatever it was. I was always able to get those bouts of sobriety whenever it started to get out of control. I couldn't stop. I would wake up every morning, hands were shaking, I was nauseated, I was sweating. A lot of mornings I would vomit. And the only way to stop that would be to, you know, drink a Coors Light and pop a Xanax before morning coffee. And so that got really hard to maintain. You know, most of the kids by this time had moved out, and the youngest was already driving himself and, you know, basically fending for himself. So I was already in that space of not having a whole lot of responsibility for leaving the house, which was also hard on my psyche, right? I didn't have my role as a mother the way that I did. And I had quit working a long time before that, because if you have 5 kids, you know, finding childcare for that and having both parents working is just insane. So anyway, when I could feel my liver working, you know, I just kind of sat with my husband and said, you know, I want to stop drinking and can't, right? Like, you've noticed my hands shaking. You've asked me about it. And this is me kind of being genuine, right? Like, I have to drink every day. It's no longer a choice. And I don't like it. And I mean, by this time I was already at a level where I could drink easily an 18-pack a day without anybody being able to notice the difference. And some days I'd make it through an entire 30-pack. That was noticeable, but you know, try doing that without people knowing or realizing that it's a 30-pack that you've made it through. You know, that's also difficult, right? So all of that hiding, the sneaking, the, you know, not the drinking part, but the how much it took for me to even, you know, have a noticeable buzz. Like, even that part was something that I had to hide, because I didn't want anybody to know. Like, I could get through 9 beers without even being altered, you know. So I went to treatment. By this time, you know, so we started at 443 at this point.
Say that one more time.
We started my story at the age of 4, but by the time I went to traditional treatment, you know, medical detox and a 30-day program, I was 43.
43. So what was your first impressions when you got the detox? I mean, I remember real quick about me, the second I got there, I was like, here they go with the 12 steps and all this stuff, and God this and God that. But it ended up teaching me a lot of stuff. You know, I don't agree with everything it was written in the 30s. Some stuff needs updating, but The one thing I find cool about AA, which most treatments use, is they were the first ones to ever do a self-help for drug addicts. We can't take that away from them. Bill W.
Yeah.
was a rock star in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. I spent my fair share of time in AA and going to meetings, et cetera, albeit court mandated.
Yeah.
It still was amazing, right? It's what gave me those, 1, 2, and 3 year bouts of sobriety. But my first impression of detox, because I went to a medical detox, right? So I, checked myself into a hospital setting. And this is kind of a fun story for me to tell. I checked myself in. And, so they hooked me up IV, they took me in through the ER, hooked me up to the IV to, give me all the sodiums and all the things that my liver needed. But when I got upstairs to the admit, they gave me a breathalyzer 3 times. And so I asked them why. And she's like, well, it keeps coming up 0. And, I think it's broken and I need to know what your BAC is. And I'm like, it's 0. And she looked at me funny. I'm like, I came sober. I checked in on purpose. Like I planned it. I actually scheduled it. And she was like very dumbfounded. And what actually had happened was she got my case confused with another case that was in the ER, and they were completely tore back. But so, that was my first impression was, okay, wait, this is obviously not the normal way to go to detox, is not sober, I guess. Because everybody was dumbfounded that I was there sober. And then, I was also one of the oldest people on the floor. So, I was surrounded by a bunch of 20 somethings that, by my estimation, were all drug seeking. But why wouldn't they, when my charge nurse had a laundry list of drugs they could give me. And so when I refused them all, it was, well, we're going to have to report that to your insurance that you refused. And I'm like, that's fine. Go ahead. I don't want to, I just want to detox. I don't want to take something for that. I did agree to one Valium the first night, just so that they could feel good about me going to sleep and not having a seizure. But my response to that was, I'm not going to take more benzos. If you want to give me benzos, give me my Xanax back. Like I handed you a whole prescription of Xanax when I walked through the door. Like, I literally just wanted to be off. I wanted to, clean my body, and I wanted to, feel in control of my physical body again. So, I watched them all walking around on Seroquel on the floor for as long as I could. And, as soon as my blood pressure was stabilized, I left and went to my 30-day program. They wanted to keep me there for 7-10 days, and I was like, not having it. So as soon as my blood pressure was stabilized, I moved on to the other space.
Same facility?
Yeah, I went to a 30-day treatment program that was co-occurring dual eating disorders and chemical substance.
Oh, that's great. Dual diagnosis.
Yeah. And it was a really great program. It unfortunately has since closed. But we all shared in the responsibilities as part of what led me to part of my passion in what I do in my professional life now. But we cooked together, we cleaned together, we made our menus together, we all ate whatever we wanted to eat. Like we didn't eat necessarily the same thing all the time. Our protein might have been the same, but our sides, and it was really about getting comfortable inside the kitchen. Like I needed to learn how to open the refrigerator and not grab a beer. Like it had been a really long time. I also, needed to change my relationship with food, because I, really hadn't, even though I wasn't necessarily active in anorexia at that time in my life, I certainly wasn't eating very much, because anytime you're drinking 18 beers a day, you're not eating a lot of food. There's no room.
Yeah.
Right. There's just no real room for food when alcohol is, that big a part of your life. So, we did a lot of those things together. We also were, able to go and do little shopping events together, like learn how to navigate the grocery store without going down the alcohol aisle. Go to the drugstore like CVS or, whatever, and learn how not to, seek something off of the shelf that would give us, an altered state of being. And it was great. We would go to local restaurants and during happy hour and learn how to sit and be among people that are, doing what we would normally have done, but learn how to do it in a better way. And so it was a really lovely experience. And in that, we also did go to AA and therapy groups and have, nutritionists and dietitians that helped us, as well as, therapists.
That's great that you had therapy in rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't get to stay too long at my rehab because it broke out. It's when COVID broke out. It was March 2020.
Oh,
And I got all nervous because I said to myself, I don't know what a quarantine is, and I don't want to be stuck here for like 6 months or some crazy stuff. Like I had no idea. So I was real nervous. So I left. Yeah. I only stayed there about 7 or 8 days.
and then
But
what?
yeah, I mean, I was going to say that, and we didn't get therapy in there, but unless I didn't stay long enough, you know what I mean? Maybe they started at mid-month or something. But yeah, that's great that you had, I'm assuming it was probably CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
CBT, DBT, yeah,
a bunch of stuff.
some trauma work, but I'd done a really good job, healing from my traumas. I think that I can attribute that to my mother's modeling. Not that it was shove it down and hide it, but it was also very much of a, if you've lived through it. My mom had a really hard childhood. And so it was more of a be thankful for what for the fact that you woke up. And it was kind of like, any day you wake up without a chalk line around your body is a great day, embrace it. And so, I kind of grew up that way. And then, having to, lean into my faith, that really helped me see that, the day we're going to go is the day we're going to go, regardless of whether we get, whether we're in an accident or we, just don't wake up and, pass away in our sleep. And I had to, kind of had to lean into that faith and that belief system when my dad was killed when I was 12 years old. Because there was that period that was, why me, why now, when he just got, clean and sober and healthy, and is actively, participating. Not that he wasn't an active participant in my life, because he was. I think that he just really, spent a lot of years working graveyard and things like that. And I think it just really took a toll on him. And I think that, it creeped up on him, I guess, if you will. And when he got a little bit older, but he went to treatment. He went to a 3-month program, and back then, wow, that's great, right? Like a 90-day program. And then we came back, and things were better. And we were on vacation, and this happened. So I had to lean into that faith. So for me, it was, for me, the trauma therapy wasn't as important to me as the therapeutic value of figuring out how to experience living differently, and how to actually show up differently for myself, as a people-pleasing codependent, and somebody that had been a mom for the majority part of her life, right? 16 to 43, I had been responsible for other people's lives, and now they're all grown up and we're starting their own. And you go, like I have to recreate me. And so I found a lot of the work that we did there very valuable. I just didn't want to spend a lot of time ruminating and wallowing in things that I had already kind of lived through.
So let's talk about the final stage of sobriety for you. When did you get actually sober? Like, what's your sober date, and how'd you do it? How'd you stand sober, things like that.
So my sober date, the actual day that I checked myself in, was March 29th, 9 years ago. So that would have been
2013.
2013. Yeah, because I was 43. So yeah, 2013. Clearly don't count my days.
Yep.
I don't count my days. I don't count my months. I do know how many years it's been. And that's just, kind of that's just
Good
kind
enough.
of, that's good enough for me. And so, I think, my experience with detox and stabilization, as I refer to it, that 30-day program to me was nothing more than stabilization. And that's not a slam, because I just said how much I enjoyed everything that we did at that program and how pivotal it was for me in my life. It was a launching platform. It was definitely not the foundation that got me, that brought me to where I am today. And it can't. 30 years of conditioned way of being and experiencing life was not going away in 30 days. It was not getting corrected in 30 days. It was not getting changed in 30 days. Like, we have to expect that it's going to take longer. And again, I'm somebody who has worked in every level of addiction treatment as a practitioner, as a trained professional. And I still see that, and I don't know, some states are different, right? Where I live, 21 to 30 days is about all anybody gets anymore. And then they get discharged to AA and therapy, which is not the end of the world, right? Like, it can be enough for those that it's enough for, but it's not enough for a lot of people. So for whatever reason, we're not getting longer terms of coverage. There are a few facilities I know here in California that are still getting longer approvals to have clients be engaged in for longer periods. Because guess what? Post-acute withdrawal is a real thing. It truly comes and goes in cycles, off and on, for the first 2 years of sobriety. In my 9 years, because if I go back to what kept me sober, when I was discharged, I went to a few meetings. We didn't have AA in my city. There was none, zero. So I had to go, a little bit over, and it just wasn't a good fit. It wasn't, it just wasn't the same. And so, I joined a women's group. I was the only addict in there. But everybody else had their fair share of other issues. And so that was my version for me, was to, to have that support group that we engaged in each other's lives and got together once a week, but chatted throughout the week. And it was therapist ran. But I went to school. I went to school because I wanted to know everything that I could know possibly about what and how it happened to me, because there I was, a highly functioning, alcoholic for a really long time, who could always stop whenever it got out of control, right? Like, I needed to know, how did this, develop into this physiological, I can't stop. So of course, my first class was the physiological effects of drugs and alcohol in the body, which is where I learned that it was the combo of the Xanax and the alcohol that created the physiological issue that I was having. Of course, and myself, because I had to open them and actually put them in my mouth. And so I had to take some responsibility there. But, so I went to school and learned a lot of things. So, and that was about post-acute withdrawal. And so in my time working with other people, I've had that ability to teach them about it and see just in knowing when those cycles are happening and what they look like and feel like for each person, because it's very individual. It's very different for each person, but being able to lean into that and knowing how to sit in and move through it is really helpful, because it's truly what I see as the largest contributing factor to relapse and difficulty in long-term sobriety.
Yeah.
I think I answered your question. Sorry, I can go off on little spirals very easily.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I'm the same way. People call them my tangents. Once you get me going on one thing, my mind then goes, well, what about this and that, and all that fun stuff.
I call them
So
sermons.
my last question for you that I usually ask everybody is, do you have any advice for people listening and people watching?
Ooh, I do. Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, do whatever you have to do. Get a coach, whatever it is, right? A trained professional that can help you do these things. And if you need help, let me know. I'm happy to answer your questions. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not the right person for everybody, but you have to do these things. You must dive in and get to know yourself. And I mean, truly get to know yourself at a level that you've never done before. And doesn't have to be traumatizing. There are simple surveys and assessments that you can do on your own that will give you insight into the 6 categories of whole health that will let you know and help you get to know yourself. So that's number 1. Then you need to completely redefine what life balance means to you. And if you define life balance as home, work, and health, you need to drastically expand that. There are 8 primary categories that create life balance, and there are 6 subcategories that go into your health. And so you need to define these categories for you. Don't let some book or somebody else's definition of spirituality define spirituality for you in your life balance. I'm going to try to do this, as quickly as I possibly can. From there, you have to have go-to very practical skill sets and tactics. These are psychological skill sets and tactics that you can practically apply in your life. It's very important that you learn that practical application, or you're going to end up in talk therapy for 5 years and wonder why you're not making any headway, right? So we have to learn very effective centering and grounding tactics. This means I can get centered and grounded in the spur of the moment, no matter what I'm doing, without relying on meditation, yoga, or the like. Because here's the deal. When you're driving down the freeway and somebody cuts you off, you can't drop into downward dog or meditation. You've got to have something that is going to center you and ground you. Then you've got to really work on that knee-jerk impulsivity. It is important that you can change this part of you. That's that access to the fight or flight. We need new ways of doing this. So we need to learn whatever it is that we need to learn. Of course, I know plenty of tactics that you can utilize to become responsive in all things that we do. All things. Literally everything. You have to be responsive, not reactive. Then there's a whole bunch of other things, but I want you to really know about what you rely on to bring you peace, joy, comfort, relief, value, validity, and worthiness cannot come from outside of you. We have spent enough time as addicts relying on something else, right? Alcohol, pills, whatever, right? Illicit drugs, food, shopping, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is for you, even if it's the gym, if you're relying on it to bring you peace, joy, comfort, relief, value, validity, and worthiness, we got some work to do. And then we got to have distress tolerance. Distress tolerance and emotion regulation are important factors in creating the level of emotional intelligence that you need, that you didn't know that you need, but need to be successful long-term, because we have to condition new ways of being, and we have to do so in a lifelong, manageable, and maintainable fashion, because if it's not, we're going to continue this cycle. That means you have to get dedicated to yourself to be working on this at least for a solid 12 months in reconditioning of how you are experiencing living, how you are experiencing your environment, how you want to see yourself, how you want to be received by others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a hard process, but you do have to be dedicated. And then I always say, add, edit, delete, change, shift, morph, make it your own. There is no one program, one cookie cutter thing that will work for everybody. And so wherever you are, whatever it is you're engaged in, just know that you can add, edit, delete, change, shift, morph it, incorporate it into your life to serve you. Don't try to fit your life into somebody else's bubble. That's it. This is what I got for you.
That's what you got for me? No, I like what we've talked about today. How do you feel?
I feel amazing.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So did you have anything else you want to add in?
No, I mean, literally, I'm an open book.
Well, don't you have a podcast or something that you have going on?
I do. Right now, it's a weekly live. It's on my, it airs on my business Facebook page, which is Turning Leaves Recovery /2015, something like that.
Okay.
And it airs on Facebook Live every Wednesday at noon. We are going to be shifting this to podcast form, but you can also find it on the Turning Leaves Recovery YouTube page, which is probably an easier place to find it. You can watch all episodes there. And if you have trouble, you can always reach out to me, Tricia Pardo, or Turning Leaves Recovery. And I'll connect you with any of the free resources that I have available.
Awesome. And the last thing real quick, how do they reach out to you that you want?
Easy. Just go to Turning Leaves, LEAVES, recovery.com. You can get a free whole health survey. Or you can just contact me. Or if you're on social media, Instagram, it's I am Tricia Pardo. Which that's hard. Just go to the website because my phone number is posted. My website, my phone number is there. That's my cell phone. Just send me a text. I don't care.
Awesome. Awesome. That sounds great. I love what you're doing. I love the interview today. And I guess that's all we got. So for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you heard and saw, go below and give us a like. Also subscribe to the channel. You'll see when we update and add new videos. You can also find us on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So hopefully you'll check us out on one of those platforms, get connected. And that's all we have today. So until next time.